Hello there, this is Anthony Moirore on Book Talk at Book Place, a place where we get to invite authors to come and talk about their books. And today we have a very great author. And the author's name is none other than Sara Zeff Geber. I hope I got that right.
Yes.
Thank you, Sara. So, Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, and for a brief introduction, Sara is a recipient of the Influencers in Aging description by PBS Next Avenue. She's an author, retirement transition coach, and professional speaker on retirement and aging. Now, Sara has authored a book which is called Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers. That is a retirement and aging roadmap for single and childless adults. This is whom we have in the show, and we are very glad to have you. So please, can you start by telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
I spent the better part of my career in a field called organizational development,
Okay.
and where I was helping leaders understand how to better relate to their employees and to lead a more successful organization.
Okay.
That ended up being a lot of coaching, one-on-one coaching with executives and leaders at fairly high levels in their organization. And there came a time when they started to want to talk more about their retirement plans than their plans for their companies. So I decided that that they and I were all getting to an age where we ought to be talking about retirement and our plans for the future. So I made a shift and began to help people get over that hump between working life and whatever which retirement would hold. And for some people, retirement is continuing to work at some level or at something.
Yeah.
And for other people, retirement is more of a combination of a life of leisure and giving back to their community, or playing with their grandkids, or whatever it might be. But I got more education myself. I went back to school to learn more about the psychology of making the retirement transition. And I also took classes in gerontology to understand about being an older human being, both for myself and for my clients. So that's what prepared me to work with people who were getting into their 60s and 70s and above. I also noticed somewhere along the line that there were a lot of single people that lived on their own, and people that didn't have children. My husband and I don't have children. We have each other, but at some point we don't know who's going to predecease the other. So at some point, one of us is going to be a true solo ager, as I call it.
Okay.
But there are really over 30% of the American population, the population of the US, is aging solo. They either don't have kids or they don't have family to support them because their family is far away or they're estranged from their family. So it's with the baby boom generation, it's getting to be a larger and larger number. And that led me to a lot of research and just kind of digging into who is a solo ager in this country and what do they need to thrive and to survive and thrive later in life. And that's what led me to write the book.
Oh, wonderful. And thank you very much. It's very important in the life. I mean, this life is hard living with people. How about when you come to live alone and you're aging and you don't have people to talk to? Now,
That's
this
right.
is very important. I think this is a very important part of life where we should have more insight based on your research and you writing this book. So thank you very much. What is the minimum? I mean, what's the retirement age in the US? If they may know, because some of us
Well,
are not from the
you
US.
know, we used to have a retirement age in the U.S. that was enforced by companies, and that retirement age used to be either 60 or 65, depending on what profession you were in. And of
Yeah.
course, traditionally, that was just men, because men were the only ones that had a profession as
Yeah.
little as 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
That's totally not true today. And we have gotten rid of the mandatory retirement age in all but a few, just a tiny few professions that still can demonstrate in some way that people really need to be younger to do it, like being an airline pilot. There's still a mandatory retirement age there. But for the rest of us, we quote unquote retire when we feel like it, when we can afford to financially,
Okay.
when we can look more forward to doing something else, maybe to doing some charitable work, switching to working for a nonprofit. There's so many different combinations of things that people now do as they get older. And of course, our generation is living longer, and we're living longer more healthfully.
Yeah, that's good.
In
That's
most
good.
cases, or in many cases. So,
Yeah.
of course, that's not universally true. But regardless of all of that, we do need to plan for later life so that it doesn't catch us up in a crisis and we don't know what to do and we don't know what the resources are and where to go and how to make it work. So that's really what the book is all about, is the planning.
And one thing I'm happy about to hear from you is that these days the ages have been adjusted to transit in a comfortable way. I mean, initially, even in many other countries, the age was standard for everyone, and that made it a bit dangerous, if I may use the word, for people's life, because they come to a stop of something that they've been doing continuously. They stop living a daily life that had a program, and they have to change all over again.
Right.
And it was a bit shaky for many. So when you say that the transition is smooth right now, so to say, but not so smooth because you have to still adjust to some things, then that's a good point. That's a good encouraging view. And but still, even with that transition, people need to know how to transit, even though it be slow. And thank you for that. So how does one transit from being someone who has been busy, being someone who is going to change some habits in life? How does one do it?
How are you asking, how do you make the shift?
Yeah, the shift. How do you make the shift?
Well, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
Some people, in fact, love what they're doing so much that they do it well into their 70s and even 80s.
Okay.
A lot of people in the professions like law and medicine continue to practice long into a life when most people think, well, shouldn't you be retired? Shouldn't you be going on to something else?
Okay.
But people with more physically challenging occupations often feel like they really do need, and they should, retire at a little bit younger age. When they get to be 60 or 65 or say 70, bodies wear out. So if you're doing something like, maybe you're a landscaper, or you may be someone who has to do a lot of lifting in your job, your body has a hard time maintaining that after about 35 or 40 years.
Yeah.
So planning is important, especially if you do have a job that's very taxing on your body. It's important that you make a plan to save some money so that you will be in good shape financially when you retire.
Yeah.
And these days, most people in America depend on their Social Security. They depend on what they've saved. And in some cases, companies still offer a pension. People who work for the government, for instance, in any level, still get a pension. But that's not true for those of us out in the private world. Most companies have eliminated that. and let employees set up kinds of funds like TIOs and IRAs, which allow them to save money for themselves rather than the company saving money for them. In some cases, that's worked out okay. In other cases, it hasn't. So, but it's all part of the planning, and I encourage people to plan early so that they can have some choice when they get older. People who don't plan very well, don't prepare very well for later life,
Yeah.
often end up in a situation where their bodies wear out, but they haven't saved enough or planned well enough to have a comfortable retirement, and that's a scary thing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in that situation because we've had a nasty economic downturn, and now we've all just hopefully survived COVID, which also led to some financial struggles for a lot of people. So, so it's challenging. It's very challenging. But to the extent that I'm talking to younger people out there,
Yeah.
plan early. Start to plan early because you don't know what life's going to bring in the way of ups and downs.
Yeah, and I think it's a very big challenge that people are facing right now with COVID, and is affecting every kind of person, even the old, the young. And you mentioned a very important point there about finance. When you're growing old and you're not in a good financial status, it could be very traumatizing. Uh, could that be the biggest challenge that you know in people growing old, aging, or even the solo agers that you focus on? Or which other problems do you think that people could be expecting to face when they grow older?
Well, I do think that finances can be a problem.
Yeah.
But if you are someone for whom finances are not a problem,
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily going to be smooth sailing if you haven't prepared and thought about things like where you're going to live.
Yeah.
If you live in a big house that has 2 or 3 levels to it and you're walking up and down stairs all the time, you may not be able to do that
Yeah.
later in life.
Mm-hmm.
So preparing for where you want to live, preparing for who is going to take care of you when you get to a point where you're too frail to take care of yourself. And,
Yeah.
my generation, baby boomers, just don't want to think that we're
Mm-hmm.
ever going to get frail. But those who have already been through the experience of taking care of their own parents or grandparents and seeing how frailty comes about and what it prevents you from doing, know that our generation is going to get there too, unless you get taken out of the game somehow by a illness of some kind that has you leaving this planet sooner than you otherwise would. You're going to be faced with an older life where you can't do as much. So planning ahead for where you're going to live and who you're going to be with and how you're going to manage to get care for yourself is a very important thing.
Yeah.
And it's a different answer for everybody. In
Mm-hmm.
some cases, family will be there
Yeah.
to take care for you, younger generations. It's always why it's a good idea to keep in good graces with the younger generations in your family.
Yeah.
Because as we say, what goes around comes around.
Sure.
But I've written my book specifically for people who don't have family and
Okay.
how they can prepare for a later life. And it's actually turns out to be more about community and social support systems,
Okay.
I call them, than about money.
Yeah.
So making sure that you are in a community, you've formed a community, you're nurturing your role in that community so that when the time comes, that community will be there to help and protect you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the important thing. I just spent a week taking care of a solo ager friend of mine
Okay.
who got sick. She does not have a spouse or children. She never married. She was a scientist all her life. And she was diagnosed with a particularly tricky kind of cancer
Yeah.
where she was unable to really manage her own transportation or manage getting her own food. So I was one of a rotation of people because she's been a lifelong friend of mine that helped her through this. And I was gone last week doing that. So that's the kind of support system that we all need to build up.
Yeah.
And again, where you help where you can, and people will help you in turn.
Yeah. So, at what age should people be reading this book? I mean, how, because you talk about preparing early. How early is too early, and how early is good?
Well, I don't know that people in their 20s and 30s would relate to the book very well,
Okay.
but I certainly would suggest that anyone over the age of 50
Yeah.
take a look at it,
I think I'm safe.
especially those of you out there
Yeah.
who, like me, don't have children.
Okay.
And in the baby boom generation, almost 20% of women never gave birth.
Yeah.
Now, some of those married into families where there were already children. Some of them may have adopted, but it doesn't diminish the numbers terribly. We're still talking about probably at least 18 or 19% of women who do not have their own children.
Okay.
So, and of course, our children are historically, traditionally, the people that are kind of expected to make sure that we're safe and fed and clothed, and that we don't need anything later in life. They take care of us. But if you don't have children, it's hard to conjure them up later in life.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to make other arrangements.
And I understand when you say people without children, but what I have observed is even people with their children, the children are sending them to hospice very early because they have their own families to look after. They have,
That's right.
Yeah, so it's quite a big challenge for many people.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, in the U.S., we have several different levels of kind of places where people might age with other older adults and have care available to them.
Okay.
But that takes money. The government doesn't pay for that here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So if you have done a good job of saving some money, or you have a good pension, maybe you have a house that's worth a lot of money that you can sell, there are places that you can move into where they do take care of you.
Okay.
They're called continuous care retirement communities,
Okay.
CCRCs, or life plan communities. So that's one way of planning ahead for later life.
Okay.
These are communities that you move into when you're fully capable of independent living, and as you need more help, as you need assistance with what we call the activities of daily living.
Okay.
Bathing, grooming, dressing, using the toilet, getting out of bed, those kinds of things. If you start to need help with those, then they move you up to a level called assisted living.
Okay.
Now, there are also just simply assisted living communities that one can pay on a monthly basis to live in. And you get all of the care that you need, plus your meals are taken care of, and you also have a social life in those places.
But
you have
also
an opportunity.
those places are also, you pay for yourself. You still pay for yourself. It's not government assisted.
No, that's the interesting thing about the United States, and the thing that a lot of people misunderstand. They think that Medicare is going to pay if they need care later in life. And I'm sorry to disillusion those of you that may think that, but that's not true.
Okay.
Medicare covers medical expenses,
Yeah.
but assistance with the daily activities of living is not considered a medical expense. It's all private pay.
Okay.
So unless you completely deplete your funds and can qualify for what's known as Medicare, or where I live in California, it's called Medi-Cal, then you can get some help with that. But that relegates you to usually a skilled nursing facility that is unnecessary for most people, because they don't have a medical condition. They just need help with the daily living activities. So ideally, you would be in an assisted living community where you would get help with what you need, but you're not bedridden. Most people aren't bedridden at that point, and that's really what skilled nursing facilities are for.
Okay.
So I encourage people to learn the difference between all of these different kinds of facilities or communities that you might move into, figure out where the good ones are, where the bad ones are, so that if and when you do have a crisis, you break a hip or you take a tumble, hurt yourself in some way, or get diagnosed with a very serious illness, have to go in the hospital. When you come out of that hospital, it's a good idea to know where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Know where those resources are in your community. And I encourage people to go in and tour them and see what they're like. Again, those of you out there who have taken care of your parents, you've been in some of those. Well, many of them have changed a great deal since then, so check them out. I know every time I say this to people, I get people looking at me and say, I'm not going in those places.
Okay.
They're not so bad.
Yeah.
Some of them are so bad, but
Yeah.
many of them are lovely places to be. And like it or not, you will be an older person one day.
Yeah, everyone is going to be, or let's hopefully that everyone, as if we make it, because it's seemingly dangerous these days. People are not making to their mid ages. They are just, I mean, it's scary. So through the grace of God and maybe your own care, you've reached to such an age. But these days, it's a bit scary. But if we are not going to die early, then we are going to get old, and it's better prepared. Someone said it's better to be prepared than and miss an opportunity than to meet with an opportunity and not be prepared. So
Right.
it's good to be prepared for what may eventually happen once you grow old. And I am just hoping that this, because with the systems that you are talking about, I'm hoping that they are in any other country, because this is going to be hard in many other countries.
It will.
And the good thing is that if they are not having those kinds of systems, the person who's listening to this, the person who's going to read your book, is the one who is going to employ those systems in their own country to be helpful for others.
Yes, and it's good to really learn what is available from the government in your country, because some governments in countries that have more of a socialized medicine system, some countries take very good care of their older adults. And in other places, older adults are well taken care of by their families because it's tradition. So what I have written about is really growing older in the United States, where it can be more of a challenge because we don't have those systems, and in many cases, we don't have the family traditions.
Yeah.
So then you're caught between no family traditions and no government help.
Yeah.
You have to prepare for this yourself. You're your only resource. So.
Oh, yeah. So can you maybe break down for us the book? I mean, give us a brief synopsis of the book so that we have an idea of what is in it.
Sure. I'm going to look back at the book myself because I wrote it in 2018, and sometimes I even forget how I divided it up into chapters and sections. I did divide it up into 4 sections.
Okay.
The first section deals with preparing for the future, and in that I have tried to kind of chronicle what it is that a typical adult child does for their parent.
Yeah.
Because it's a great way to shed a light on what we're going to have as solo agers, what we're going to have to prepare to do for ourselves if we don't have children. So what are all those things that adult children do for their parents? Well, they usually they pay their bills, they manage their finances, they help them move into a more suitable place to live. Often they pick up medications, they keep them stocked with groceries. Depending on where that older parent lives, there's a lot of things that adult children attend to. So looking at that helps us give some perspective on how we need to prepare for the future.
Okay.
And then the second part really goes into more of a traditional, there's loads of retirement books out there. And this one in the second chapter goes through a lot of how do we prepare for retirement? How do you have a happy, satisfying older life after you've left your midlife career? So I go through a lot of that, having a life with meaning and purpose, being adaptable, being flexible, just kind of understanding what your values are at this point. Because if you leave a job and you don't really know what you're going to do next, it's helpful to kind of take a self-evaluation, much as you might have done back when you were leaving school and thinking about what kind of profession you wanted to go into. It's called a values clarification exercise. And my book has a lot of worksheets and checklists that help people kind of do this for themselves as they move along in the book.
Okay.
So the third section deals totally with where you're going to live, because I think that is one of the biggest questions for solo agers is where are you going to live later in life, where you're going to be safe, secure, happy, fulfilled, have a social life, have something meaningful to do. And finding that all in one package is sometimes challenging. But this one has worksheets and checklists that help you kind of evaluate where you are and how you want to give back, if that's what you want to do, how you want to live your life. And I go through kind of a thorough digest of all the different kinds of living situations that are available for older adults. Again, it's very American centric. So that's could be one drawback for people who live outside the country. You will probably have similar systems, but they won't be exactly the same as yours. So I think it's helpful. It's most helpful for people that live in the US.
And people can always have a picture from what they see and try and, compare with what is around them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the fourth and last section of the book deals with how do we ensure that we're going to be comfortable and safe in our much older age? Because these days, the medical community is able to keep us alive, even though we may have some serious conditions, like diabetes or some forms of cancer. There are a number of life-threatening diseases that today, well, they may have killed you 20 years ago or 40 years ago. Today, medical science knows how to keep us alive, but maybe not quite as healthfully as we once were. So how are you going to ensure that you're going to be comfortable in later life? And of course, that ties back to where you live. But it also has to do with how do you plan for end of life? How do you talk to the people around you about what you want at the end of life, and how do you prepare for that? So it kind of comes full circle.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that synopsis. And as we proceed, all the listeners who are listening, those who are watching, and those who are going to watch after this, if they want your book, where can they get it?
The best way to get my book, well, two ways. One, you can buy it through any of the online booksellers, including barnesandnoble.com and Amazon and Apple Books. You can get it that way. If you prefer to do business with your local bookstore, they can order it for you very easily. You just tell them the title and the author, and they'll be able to get it for you probably within days.
Okay, show us the book again, please.
I'll show you the book again.
For those who may have forgotten, it's Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers. Okay, and though even you may have mentioned about why you focused on solo agers, please tell us, do you have contact? Did you get to interact with some solo agers in your life and find out the experiences they are going through, so that maybe you could get some tips from there?
Yes. Well, the way that I am a solo ager myself by my own definition, because
Okay.
I consider people who don't have children, even if they're married, to
Yeah.
be solo agers.
Mhm.
Because my husband and I don't have a crystal ball, nor does anybody. So we don't know who's going to predecease the other.
Yeah.
But the one who is left will definitely be
A
a
solo
pure
agent.
solo ager. They'll be
Yeah.
aging on his or her own.
Mhm.
So, um, I realized at one point about 15 years ago that that I was going to be a solo ager, or
Yeah.
my husband,
Mhm.
and I realized too that there were lots of people around me who were solo agers. I have a lot of single women friends
Mhm.
or couples that don't have children, and I thought, boy, there's a
Yeah.
lot of us out there.
Mhm.
So that's how I decided that. Well, I also took a look at whether there was any research going on at all, anybody talking about this, and there wasn't.
Mhm.
So I went to the senior living industry. They weren't talking about it.
Okay.
The aging industry, they weren't talking about it. The care industry, they weren't talking about it. So I thought, well, somebody needs to talk about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's why I got into it.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question, Anthony? I wasn't sure
It
that I
does
had.
answer your the question.
Great.
You stressed on much why you chose to focus on the solo agers, and through, I mean, from the book, maybe it tells us what are the activities that the solo agers, apart from, now you mentioned being in the social groups, in the social settings that you give examples of, but what are the activities that you encourage people to get involved in so that they age gracefully?
That's a good question. What activities to get involved in?
Yeah.
You know, I have when I do my talks, and
Yeah.
I talk to professional groups, I talk at senior centers, I talk at all kinds of gatherings, I talk at singles groups, and the most frequent question I get,
Yeah.
or the most frequent comment, is how I'm not much of an extrovert, or I'm not much of a social person. How
Mhm.
do I make those important connections? And I I don't have any perfect answers for
Okay.
people that ask those questions. All I can say is get involved with people,
Yeah.
become a joiner.
Mhm.
So many people say, "Oh, I'm just not a joiner. I don't like to belong to clubs and organizations." But you need to, because the big club that you belonged to when you were working
Mhm.
was your workplace. And for a lot of people, that's where they made their friendships. That's where they found people to hang out with, sometimes even on the weekends.
Yeah.
That's where their friends were.
Mhm.
Or, and in many cases, people didn't even know their neighbors,
Yeah.
because they just didn't have the time to
Mhm.
get involved with neighbors. They were so involved with with work or with their immediate families, raising their kids.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes kids can be an avenue toward developing a kind of a social structure,
Yeah.
because you get to know the parents of your kids'
Mhm.
friends and whatnot. So, for people with children, that can grow kind of organically through their
Okay.
kids and then their in-laws, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But if you don't have kids, and you don't have kids living nearby,
Mhm.
you can be very isolated if you don't
Yeah.
begin to join some organizations.
Mhm.
Join groups that have similar interests to yours.
Yeah.
Anything from a golf foursome to a book club to a bike riding, a riding club. Um, there are You can get involved in your church or synagogue or mosque.
Okay.
That's a wonderful place to
Mhm.
develop social connections. And
Mhm.
even if you haven't been in a place of worship for 40 years, they will still welcome you back.
Yeah, you can
And
always start again.
places of worship have all kinds of opportunities to socialize and get into interest groups with people that have similar concerns, similar interests that you have. And most mosques synagogues, churches that I've had anything to do with
Mhm.
also have groups for older adults. They're
Yeah.
really good in supporting their older adults, and they can help you over a lot of these kind of crises that we're talking about. So I encourage that. Um, get involved in your community, see what's happening in um, the town you live in the county that you live in, the parish or township or whatever it's called where you are. Find out what their needs are. Where can you volunteer to help out?
Yeah.
Maybe you can help out with in soup kitchens or food drives or clothing drives. There's so much need out there, so many ways to get involved. And that's how you get involved with people too, when you get involved with causes that you believe in.
Mhm. So it's a matter of just having your eyes open and your feet on the move and
That's right.
your hands ready to help.
That's right.
Yeah, because there are people who get bedridden very quickly because they have nothing, they are thinking of nothing, they are doing nothing, and they are going nowhere.
That is so right, Anthony.
Yeah.
I run into a number of people who have said, "Oh, what can I do for my brother? He just retired 2 years ago and he just lays in front of the TV all day long." And I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's such a nightmare."
Mhm.
Hard to get people to get up and moving. And that's why it's so important to plan before you leave your job. What am I going to do?
And yeah,
Don't sit in front of the TV for 12 hours a day. That's just so unhealthy.
so for those who are watching this video, listening, if you have someone whom you think needs to be woken up to go and start planning for their future, then this is the right time to give them this book as a gift and encourage
Yeah.
them and
Or
encourage
read
them.
it or
Yeah.
read it aloud to them or something.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have an audio book of it, an audio version?
I'm sorry, what was
Do you
that?
have an audio version of the book?
Another version?
Audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, it is
Uh-huh.
out. It is available as an Audible.
Okay.
It's available on Kindle and Apple Books, electronic books. It's available in paperback. It's available as an Audible. Yes.
Thank you very much for presenting it in so many formats so that nobody has an excuse that he didn't read it. If you don't read it, you can listen to it. Wonderful. That's great. So before we get through the program, what are the most important things? I mean, like a parting shot that you tell whoever is listening, whoever should be planning for their old age. I mean, the solo agers in preparation.
Kind of what's important in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things very important is to talk.
Yeah.
Communicate about your feelings about getting older.
Mm-hmm.
Communicate about your thoughts about death, about what are you afraid of, what are you looking forward to, um, who who are the people you want to have in your life for the rest of your life. Let them know that you care about them and that you want to be involved in kind of a mutual caring relationship with them, because they may be the first ones to get sick or have a problem, or they have to go in and have a knee replacement or something and they need your help, or you may be the person that has a health challenge of some sort. So we never know who it's going to be, and the more people we can bring into our inner circle, the healthier it is, because we will lose people. Those of you who are listening who are in your 60s or 70s, you've lost people already,
Yeah.
and it feels like a kind of a game of musical chairs once in a while, watching people leave our lives for lots of different reasons. Some people will just simply move away.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens to solo agers is that they probably throughout their lives have a number of friends that do have children.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have lived in that same house where they raised their kids for 40 years.
Yeah.
But once those kids pick up and move across the country, off they go. And your your friendship is sacrificed on the altar of being with those kids and grandkids,
Mhm.
and off they go to the other side of the world or the other side of the country to be near those kids. So those of us without kids have to be shored up in some ways, that we have a number of people in our lives, so we're not depending on just one person or one other couple. Bring people into your life and in different ways, so you'll have a wider social support system in your life.
Yeah, thank you very much. Because loneliness could be one of the most dangerous points
Yeah,
or conditions to be in once you are
yeah,
growing old. You know, I want to imagine that it's okay to be lonely when you are 20 and 30 because you can always have the hope of recovering. But when someone is growing old and is lonely, that's devastating.
yeah. We've
Mm.
all seen examples of what loneliness and isolation can do to people through this whole COVID crisis, which is
Yeah.
still going on in many places.
So the main idea is get connected, be
Yeah, get
social,
connected.
be
You're
social.
absolutely right, Anthony. Get connected and stay connected.
Yeah, speak out and yes, talk about your emotions, talk about your conditions. And mentioning on this, you mentioned about uh, talking about death. I know it's an easy thing to talk about medical conditions. I'm sick of this and that. And because you can always attract some help from somewhere, from children, from friends who are with you. But how do you tackle the idea of death? Speaking about it.
Yeah. Speaking about death,
Yeah.
the probably the best thing you can do is to start to speak about death.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it. Talk
Yeah.
about it with your family.
Mm-hmm.
It's so odd to me. Death is such a part of our lives.
Yeah.
It's not anything we can escape from.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about what you want, who and what you want to have around you when your time comes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Share those ideas. Here in the U.S., we have actually it's in many countries, in many English-speaking countries for sure. I'm not certain about others. We
Okay.
have something called Death Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually started in England, I believe, spread to the US and Canada and Australia. And this is where people just get together and talk about death.
Uh-huh.
What are they afraid of? What's their experience been? What do they want in their own lives when they die? Who do they want to talk to about it? And they practice talking about death with whoever comes to the Death Cafe, which is usually just an hour or an hour and a half long. People bring some kind of food to share. There's no leader. People
Yeah.
just talk about death. I've been to a number of them. Yeah, they've been uh, very enlightening. I've learned a lot about other people's perceptions of death and how varied it is.
Yeah.
People's perception of death and people's wishes for death. But you don't have to find a death cafe. You can just start talking to your family about it.
And I think it takes a lot of courage to move to get to go into
Yeah,
a death cafe
it
and
does.
start talking
My
about it.
I'd like to tell the story of my father.
Mm-hmm.
When I was still in my late teens and early 20s, my father, who was almost 40 when I was born, so he was on the older side of being a parent, and he wanted to talk to me about his will and what he wanted when he died, where he wanted to be buried, and I just didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to lose my dad somewhere in my 20s, and I didn't want to talk about death. He wasn't that old then.
Yeah.
But I resisted and resisted, and he just wore me down. And I said, okay, talk to me. So he showed me where the safe deposit box was and the bank accounts. And he actually, this was a different time
Yeah.
when people actually had safe deposit boxes. But he even put my name on some accounts so that I would partially own them,
Mhm.
make it easier when he died. He drove me out to the cemetery where he had already bought a plot, and he had already even picked out his coffin.
Mhm.
So, was that hard for me? Yes. Was it probably hard for him too? Yes. But you know what? When he died, I didn't have to make one decision. It was just turnkey. All I did was make one call to the mortuary and everything was done. There is no kinder gift you can give to your family than to do that.
Yeah. Thank you
So,
very much. Because I know that many people experience a lot of problems once a loved one goes because they don't have the slightest idea where is what.
right,
And
right.
it becomes a lifelong chase of trying to find what was hidden where, in which box, which key to open which box. And
Yep.
so that becomes so I think this is a good point why we should talk about uh, things that could happen once we are not there.
Yes, absolutely. You
Yeah.
need to find a family member that you really trust, or a
Mhm.
few. If you have a trusting, loving family,
Mhm.
invite them in, share this with them, and you'll find that your younger members will put up resistance because they won't want to talk about this. But the more you kind of force them to, or gently, the better off they'll be
Because they're saying
throughout
that
their
once
own
you,
life and
yeah,
when your time comes.
because the notion is that if you're talking about death, then you're inviting death, and that's why it traumatizes people not to speak about death. They don't like speaking about it. But
No,
you
nobody
mentioned
does.
your own father. And I also had a father who was growing old. He had been a minister, and so when he grew older and he was in his 70s, he was always saying, "I finished my work here. I need to go home." And we were, "Hey, you still have time here. Stop talking about you going. We need you here." But we said there's no other option. I mean, once you're grown old and you've come to a certain age, at some point you'll have to leave, which you don't know when, but you'll
That's
have to
right.
leave. So you need to be free to talk about it.
Yeah, make peace with it yourself. Know
Yeah.
that it's going to happen, and then make peace with the rest of your family about it. The best thing you can do is to bring death into an everyday conversation such that it's not this horrific thing when somebody mentions it. It's just part of life.
Yeah. We are talking about solo ages, but would you also encourage it on every other person, even when,
Oh,
because you never know
absolutely.
your day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We should all be talking more about every aspect of life, including death.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean to dwell on it. We don't have to dwell on it, but just to talk about it as not some scary, horrible thing, but that's something that just happens to all of us. We just pass out of this existence on this planet, no matter whether you think there's an afterlife or dust to dust. Um, it's just going to happen. So make peace with it.
Yeah, and because every single day we are seeing people leaving this world, and not old people, but young people. So
Yep.
I think it's a good idea to talk about what could happen, where, or where, I mean, and let your other people, your friends, your family know about your details. So thank you very much. We are very honored to have you in our show. So whoever is listening and or watching this, read this book. You don't have to be old to know how getting old feels. And don't wait to learn through your experiences, bad experiences. We say we learn through experiences, but this one you don't have to. You have to
That's
prepare
right.
in advance.
You can.
You need to prepare in advance. So it's good to grab a book by Sara, read it, get it to your friends, and buy gifts to your family so that they also may have an idea of how growing old should be prepared for. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you, Sara, for being on our
Thank
show.
you. Thank you, Anthony. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all our viewers, those who are watching the live version and those who are watching the recorded version. Thank you very much.
Yes,
And
thank you.
remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, go to our website, bookplacemedia.com, and follow us also there. And if you need
Great.
to be on the show, please also tell us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye all.